The med bay of Station Theta 9 smelled of antiseptic and something else, something wild. Dr. Lyra Halen didn't flinch as she heard the low growls echoing through the corridor. She simply adjusted her medical kit, checked her supplies one more time, and waited. They were coming. The Cravathi were apex predators from a world where mercy was a concept as alien as photosynthesis. Six-limbed, covered in midnight black fur that rippled with corded muscle. They stood nearly 8 feet tall when fully grown. Their eyes glowed amber in low light, and their fangs could pierce through military-grade armor. The Galactic Council had classified them as a Level 9 threat species, the kind you negotiated with from behind plasma shields. The kind you never, ever touched. But these weren't adults. These were cubs, 17 of them, to be precise. Injured in a reactor malfunction on their transport vessel, now docked at the station for emergency repairs. The youngest was barely 3 cycles old. The oldest, perhaps 7. The door hissed open, and Sarik entered first. He was the largest of the group, his shoulders already broad enough to promise the terrifying adult he would become. A deep gash ran across his left forelimb, still weeping dark blood, despite the crude field dressing someone had applied. His lips were pulled back in an instinctive snarl, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. His eyes fixed on Dr. Halen. With the cold calculation of a born hunter, every species in the galaxy would have stepped back, every species except one. "Hello, Sarek," Dr. Halen said calmly, not breaking eye contact. "That looks painful. Let's take care of it." The cub's ears flattened against his skull. A warning. Behind him, 16 other pairs of glowing eyes watched from the corridor, their growls creating a chorus of barely contained violence. Dr. Halen pulled out a chair and sat down, making herself smaller, less threatening. Then she did something that made the Asrani station commander watching through the security feed gasp in horror. She extended her hand, palm up, completely undefended. "I'm going to help you," she said. "But I need you to trust me." Sarek's nostrils flared as he scented the air. Humans were supposed to smell like prey, soft, weak, afraid. But this one smelled like something else. Something that didn't run. His instincts warred with his pain. The wound hurt. It hurt badly. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward and placed his massive paw in her small, 5-fingered hand. Dr. Halen's hands never trembled. She guided him to the examination table, her movements gentle but confident. As she began to clean the wound, Sarek's body went rigid. Every muscle coiled to strike. One swipe of those claws could disembowel her. One bite could crush her skull like an eggshell. "I know," she murmured, as if reading his thoughts. "I know it hurts. But you're doing great. You're very brave." No one had ever called him brave. Strong, yes. Fierce, certainly. But brave was something else. Brave implied choice in the face of fear. She worked quickly, efficiently. Her hands moved with practiced precision, cleaning, disinfecting, sealing. When she wrapped the bandage around his arm, she tied it with a small knot. Neat, secure, almost caring. "There," she said, meeting his eyes again. "All done. You did perfectly." Sarek stared at her for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that would later be studied by xenopsychologists across 3 sectors, he lowered his head and pressed his forehead gently against her shoulder. A Cravathi sign of respect, typically reserved for pack elders. Dr. Halen smiled and scratched behind his ear. "You're welcome. Now, let's get your siblings fixed up." One by one, they came. A small female with burns across her back, whimpering despite her best efforts to appear strong. A pair of twins with matching cuts across their faces. A tiny cub who couldn't have been more than 2 cycles, trembling so badly his teeth chattered. Each one approached with suspicion, with fear disguised as aggression, with the weight of instinct screaming at them that this soft, small creature should be prey. And each one left with bandages, with treated wounds, with something they'd never experienced before, gentleness from a species that wasn't their own. Dr. Halen's hands never trembled. Not when claws came too close. Not when fangs snapped in pain. Not when one of the cubs, overcome by fever and confusion, lunged at her before Sarek tackled him aside. She simply steadied herself, waited for the moment to pass, and continued her work. The Azrani commander watched in disbelief. "How is she doing this?" he whispered to his second officer. "They should have torn her apart by now." "She's human," the officer replied, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. Humans came from a world where they'd domesticated wolves, creatures that could kill them with ease, where they'd learned to read the moods of predators, to speak their language not with words but with body language, with scent, with the absolute certainty that fear and respect were not the same thing. Humans understood that strength wasn't about size or claws or fangs. It was about standing your ground when every instinct screamed at you to run. It was about extending kindness to those who'd never known it. It was about hands that never trembled, even when they should. By the time Dr. Halen treated the last cub, the tiny, trembling one who'd been so afraid the others had formed a protective semicircle around her, Sarek stood closest, his bandaged arm held carefully, his amber eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, she stood and surveyed her work. 17 predator cubs, each bandaged, each treated, each looking at her with something that might have been confusion or might have been the beginning of understanding. "You're all going to heal just fine," she told them. "And you're all going to grow up to be magnificent." Sarek made a sound, not quite a purr, not quite a growl. Something in between. Something new. As Dr. Halen packed up her medical kit, the station commander's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Halen, the Cravathi adults have arrived to collect the cubs. They're asking to speak with you." She nodded, unsurprised. "Tell them I'll be right there." But before she could leave, Sarek blocked her path. For a moment, tension filled the air. Then the cub reached out with his good arm and, with surprising gentleness, touched her hand with the pad of his paw, the same hand that had never trembled, even when it should have. It was a promise, though neither of them knew it yet. A promise that years later, when the Cravathi joined the Galactic Council's defense forces, they would request human medics for their units. A promise that a species bred for war would learn that true strength sometimes wore a kind face and carried bandages instead of weapons. A promise that some hands never trembled because they belonged to a species that had learned, long ago, that the most dangerous predator in the universe was the one that chose not to be.